and welcome into the University Transfer Portal Roundup. This is our second episode, and today is January 18th of 2022, for those of you listening in the future. In this series, we kind of break down the transfer portal and how that affects, college fantasy football, future Devy outlook, and all kind of things like that. We've got some big ones to talk about and a ton of small ones to talk about. And joining me today, of course, is the one and only Devy. Jake, how are you doing today?
Howdy, partners. I'm doing good. Excited to talk some transfers. Let's jump in.
Yeah, last week we really focused on the big names, the tippity top of the rankings. This week, we're going to try and catch up some of you guys on all of these smaller guys who still project to probably start or see the field quite a bit, but definitely aren't, 5-star guys or whatever. And we'll start with quarterbacks. Just kind of quickly go through these guys. If you have anything to say, Jake, just go ahead and jump in. And the first one is Michael Penix Jr. He came from Indiana. He's going to be moving to Seattle to join his former offensive coordinator, Kalen DeBoer, at the University of Washington. That'll be interesting to see how that shakes out between him and Sam Heward. And then Connor Bazelak was playing quarterback for Missouri, started most of the season last year, but he's going to move on and go to Indiana and take that opening job with Penix leaving. And then that's kind of just a trend going on. One guy leaves, another guy comes in. We'll continue to see that as Adrian Martinez moves on from Nebraska to Kansas State. Just another example of, the girlfriend theory. His girlfriend plays soccer at Kansas State, so there he goes. And then Casey Thompson, clearing the way for Quinn Ewers, who transferred into Texas, is going to take the Nebraska gig and presumably start there. Kind of a big one for college fantasy is former Nevada backup Clay Millen. He's following his former head coach to Colorado State. Millen projected as the starter for Nevada next season after Carson Strong left for the NFL. He obviously won't be starting at Nevada, but he'll probably be starting in the same system. And then Siobhan Cordero was the Hawaii quarterback. Most of the Hawaii team kind of transferred away. Todd Graham apparently was not a good person, so nobody wanted to play for him. So he's moving on to San Diego State. They've added a couple of older guys in the portal that should be interesting for next season. But then filling in his role was Cameron Cooper from Washington State. He'll be transferring to Hawaii to compete for that job. Obviously now Todd Graham resigned, so they'll have a new coach going into next season. Lane Hatcher had a couple of great games and a couple of definitely showed some flashes at Arkansas State. However, his coach, Butch Jones, kind of refused to play him all the time, so he's moving on to Texas State, hopefully getting a full-time starting gig. Zach Gibson from Akron threw the ball around quite a bit last season, was pretty successful at it. He'll be looking to move to the Power 5 and Georgia Tech. He's from Georgia, so he might be moving closer to home, but I think he has a chance to really compete for that job. And then last of all, Jarrett Daggy moving into Western Kentucky. Obviously, we saw Bailey Zappi transfer in there last year and, just outperform everybody in college fantasy. Daggy probably not the level of prospect that Zappi was, but should be interesting in the offensive system nonetheless. Any of those guys catch your eye, Jake?
For me, the most interesting is going to be Adrian Martinez. I think I don't like any of them really for Devy. All of them, I think, have some CFF or C2C value. But Adrian Martinez, is Konami code. Great running quarterback, leaves a lot to be desired throwing the ball, and he's been around forever, but I really do wonder if his rushing is going to take away from some of Deuce Vaughn's upside. What do you think about that?
I wouldn't be too worried. I think they'll still scheme the ball to their best player.
That is fair. Another one I am excited for is Lane Hatcher. He was a top 5 graded quarterback by PFF coming into last year. We have seen 2 coaching staffs look down on him. He has not been able to beat out Logan Bonner or or James Blackman, even worse, last year. So I don't know what's going on there. I love Lane Hatcher. Every time he goes in, he seems to play well. So I don't know why he's not been given a consistent job, especially considering who else they've had. But I'm super excited to see him at Texas State and see if
Butch Jones, famously not well known for making good personnel decisions. That man kept Alvin Kamara on the bench for 4 years. So not a big fan of his coaching philosophy.
I can sense that the wounds are still fresh.
Oh, maybe a little bit. But yeah, I do agree with you. Most of these guys don't have a ton of Devy value. I think the only names that I listed that I'd be interested at all in Devy are probably maybe Lane Hatcher if you're in a really deep league, and then Clay Millen. He's like 6'5" or 6'6", really tall. Obviously going to project into a high volume passing attack, and we haven't had the opportunity to actually see him yet. So a little more hopeful just because we haven't experienced him like many of these other guys.
So very good point. That's awesome. So yeah, we want to move on to running backs. I'm happy to give that a go here. First up, Tavion Evans has left Tennessee to go to Louisville. That's bad news for Tavion Cooley, the talented true freshman who had himself quite a nice season. I personally have to think that Tavion Evans is only going there because he feels like he'll be the favored to lead that backfield. Hassan Hall is a casualty of that move, and it gets pushed out of the Louisville backfield and has transferred into Georgia Tech. With Gibbs leaving, there's a lot of touches opened up there. Amonte Watkins has left TCU for New Mexico State. He was the third string running back a lot of the time for TCU last year, but behind Zach Evans and Kendre Miller. New Mexico State has Jerry Krill as their new coach. Their incumbent COVID freshman running back, Juwan Price, is pretty talented. So I'll be surprised if Watkins is able to unseat him there.
I will jump in real quick and just say I don't think Amonte Watkins' third string was necessarily an indictment of his ability, considering he had Zach Evans and Kendre Miller in front of him, and I think both those guys are really good.
That is very fair, and good on you for jumping in to defend him. That is a talented backfield, and it'd be hard for anyone to make much noise there. Amani Bailey from the Raging Cajuns has taken the vacancy of Watkins and Zach Evans at TCU, and he'll be competing with Kendre Miller for that starting job. Jalen Berger, who had a fantastic freshman season at Wisconsin, but then seemed to get removed from the team fairly early on in the season this year, has transferred to Michigan State, so we'll see if he's been able to resolve some of those off the field issues and we can get back to seeing him play football. Kalen LeBourne, someone near and dear to my heart, has transferred to Marshall from Florida State. He's a former 5-star running back. He actually got kicked off the Florida State team 2 years ago, but he stayed at the university, earned his degree, and is actually now a grad transfer heading to Marshall. So good on him. I don't necessarily think he's going to eat too much of Rasheen Ali's workload, but former 5-stars usually tend to do pretty well in the group of 5. In the same vein, Penny Boone has left Maryland to go to Toledo, former 4-star running back for the Terrapins. Great college fantasy landing spot in Toledo. Bryant Kovac had himself a fantastic season last year. And I love Boone as a late round dart throw this season. Ashad Clayton, former track star in high school, went to Colorado for a couple of years, has transferred to Tulane. It'll be interesting to see how this implicates Tajay Spears and who ends up coming out on top, the lead back there. Lynn J. Dixon has left Clemson for West Virginia. And just today, it was announced that Trey Benson, the 3rd or 4th string running back for Oregon, has transferred to Florida State. He had some injuries the last season and we'll see. I think it's mostly a depth add for them. I still like Trayshawn Ward to carry the majority of the work for the Seminoles. Do you have anyone in there that you are partial to?
Well, I mean, Tyon Evans is a guy. He was the number one JUCO recruit last year. Had a pretty good season at Tennessee. Other than the injuries, he played in 7 games and had 521 yards and 6 touchdowns. But he didn't really play all of 7 games. I mean, he played some of 7 games. He was injured quite a bit, which is a little concerning for him, but I think he is quite talented. So that'll be interesting to see in Louisville. And then Jalen Berger is the name that like really jumps off the page of this cohort here. Because obviously he did have a great freshman season. And we just saw, Michigan State bring in a transfer running back and him just, stunt on everybody in the Big Ten. So maybe we see Kenneth Walker Jr. 2.0 or Kenneth Walker the third 2.0. Kenneth Walker 4. Oh my gosh. It's like Transformers or something. Just yeah, but other than that, I think you nailed everything on the head. Penny Boone might be interesting for CFF, but I mean, I'm not really too interested in a Toledo running back in Devy, so
can't fault you there. Why don't you catch us up on the wide receivers?
Yeah, so we talked about last week about Kanata Mumpfield joining Pittsburgh. Him and Shockey Jacques Louise were teammates for about a week, and then Shockey decided to go to Akron himself, and the two, I guess, probably just swapped dorm rooms. I mean, nothing wrong with that. Going on with Hawaii, also escaping Todd Graham was Nick Bardner. He's a big, tall receiver, kind of interesting. We'll see him in Cincy next year. Obviously, a team that's losing Alec Pierce and has a good coach in Luke Fickell, so he'll probably be deployed pretty well. And then Western Kentucky obviously saw Jarrett Stearns go to the draft, saw Mitchell Tinsley go to Penn State. So they dipped back into the portal to, again, fill in their offensive holes. Obviously, Jarrett Dagey joining in quarterback, but now Michael Matheson leaving Akron for Western Kentucky, and former Western Michigan wide receiver Jalen Hall also moving to the Hilltoppers. Both those guys had like about 800 yards last year, so should be pretty interesting to see them in that system. And then USF, South Florida, also found 2 wide receivers in the portal. They found Aju from Clemson and Coffrey Brown from UNC, 2 guys that had high expectations as recruits and pretty much failed to live up to those expectations in college. We'll see if they can, capitalize on a bit lower of competition. And then Elijah Cooks. This dude had some really great seasons at Nevada. He had 926 receiving yards in 2019, and then he's been riddled with injuries the past 2 seasons, not been able to be on the field. He'll play, I believe, his last season at San Diego State, along with Siobhan Cordero. That should be an interesting duo to watch for college fantasy. And then Tavion Robinson leaving Virginia Tech for Kentucky. This is a guy that some people thought might declare for the draft. So he's pretty talented, and obviously Kentucky graduates their best receiver in Wandale Robinson. So plenty of targets to jump into there. Jordan Watkins leaves Louisville to join Ole Miss. They have a wide open wide receiver room as well. That'll be interesting to see. Elijah Canyon from Auburn, obviously super fast. He's moving on to Purdue. Purdue pretty good at producing wide receiver talent in recent years, so that might be a little interesting. And then for CFF, one guy who is going to totally worth watching is Xavier Williams. He was a depth piece at Alabama, which, I mean, obviously not an indictment of your talent. Alabama's he obviously has a ton of great depth pieces every year. He's headed to Utah State, who just last season averaged over 300 passing yards per game. So an explosive offense where he can probably be, the number one guy, maybe. So that'll be interesting to watch out for college fantasy. And then Jaden Blue leaves Temple for Virginia Tech, and Joshua Moore moves across the state from the University of Texas to Texas Tech. Any names jumping off the page for you there?
Yeah, I have a soft spot in my heart for Jaden Blue. He's one of the only players coming back this year who has a 95 catch season under his belt, given that took place 2 years ago in 2019. Him and Cooks, I both really did. I liked coming into last year, and I was, severely disappointed, but am optimistic that they can, put it together for one final season. Elijah Cooks, I may be a little less optimistic on due to Cordero. I don't think he's necessarily a good passer. I think that the two MAC receivers joining Western Kentucky is great for them. Everyone is, down on Western Kentucky now because they lost Kitley, their offensive coordinator, who went to Texas Tech. But the person who takes over as offensive coordinator was a position coach under Kitley, and both at Western Kentucky and at Houston Baptist. So he's, intimately familiar with the system. And I think, it'd be stupid if he's to expect him to make major sweeping changes. I think we'll see them try to emulate as much as they can from what worked so much last year. I also love that you pointed out Xavier Williams. I agree. I hope he can slot right into the Devin Tompkins role. I know they're not, necessarily the exact same player, but they feed their number one target, and I think that can be X, as you said.
Yeah, what you said about Western Kentucky is definitely interesting. I was kind of worried like the casual CFF player would, just automatically lock in these Western Kentucky guys. But now I'm kind of hoping for an overcorrection because I want to get, Jalen Hall and Michael Matheson on my team, even with this new offensive coordinator, because I do think they're going to do similar things with their offense. So I'm hoping that, the Kitley move overcorrects in the other way, and we see these guys possibly be of value, but who knows what will happen.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you there. Another wide receiver we are yet to talk about, Mario Williams, transferring from Oklahoma to USC. He was 247's wide receiver 4 in last year's class. He's going to follow his former coach, Lincoln Riley, to the Trojans. Do you think that Riley can use him a little more explosively this time around?
I would hope so. When you watch the Oklahoma offense last year, it seemed like Mario Williams was underutilized. Only had, I think, 35-ish catches. So that's like 2 or 3 a game. But he looked like the best wide receiver on the field at times. And a lot of those catches came in like the short areas of the field. I'd like to see him deployed a little deeper. I was kind of hoping he wouldn't end up with Lincoln Riley again, but maybe Riley will have some bigger plans for him this year.
I've seen people say that USC is a bad landing spot because of how crowded their wide receiver room is. But for me, I think the Oklahoma room is much more talented. What is your opinion there?
Drake London's leaving. They had some guys step up last season, but I'm not sure I'm too worried.
Yeah,
plus I think McCoy is in the transfer portal. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy who transferred to Texas back to USC and now is onto his third team.